What's up, you crazy coders? Ever since we produced the audio programming training series of videos, a bunch of people have asked us to show how to program independent audio tracks on the page, each with their own independent play button, but that are all tied together. That way multiple tracks can't be playing at the same time. And before we start the tutorial, let's take a look at the finished product so that you can evaluate whether or not you'll ever need the same functionality for clients that you may be working for. And a client of mine that is a musician requested this application, so it is a real world thing that someone may hire you to program. Okay, let's show you how it works. If I hit this track, play button, that track starts playing and I can pause it. If I unpause it, it picks up at the point where we paused it. Now if that one's playing and I hit the next one, that one turns back to a play button, it stops, and then this one starts, and then it gets the pause symbol. And then I can pause that one as well. If I go back to this one, so you see how they're all tied together? That's what we're building right now in this tutorial. So sit back, relax, and strap on your helmet. We're going to begin with the bare bones of an HTML5 web document. Mine is named example.html. In the body element, the first thing we're going to do is add a div with an ID of track box. This track box is going to contain all of the individual tracks. So we're going to dynamically put track bars for each track into this track box. And we'll be doing that through JavaScript, right here in the script element. And you can also externalize this application into its own .js file if you want to get it out of your HTML document. And when we put the style in place, you can also externalize your style into a .css file if you want to get that out of the document as well. Okay, now we're going to apply all of the CSS for the application. And as we're working in the script, I'm going to explain how this CSS applies to the dynamic things that we're doing in the script. And you should have a basic understanding of CSS if you're programming JavaScript applications for web documents. The first thing I'm going to do in the script is apply a little function that I'm just going to put in place so I never have to call document.getElementById in my script. All I'll have to call is this underscore, and it will serve the same purpose. It's just so we don't have to keep writing document.getElementById over and over again, which our script isn't going to need it that much, but if it's going to do it more than once or twice or 3 times, then it's good to just package it up into a little function. And the next thing we're going to do in the script is put the window.addEventListener for the load event. And we're going to fire off a function called AudioApp. So when the document is ready, a function called AudioApp is going to execute. Let's just grab the name of that function. Let me type in function AudioApp, open close parentheses, opening curly brace, and closing curly brace. Now within the AudioApp function, the first thing we're going to do is assign some variables. And I'll explain these variables to you now. Var audio is the audio object, and all we need is one audio object, and that will power the whole app. Then we're going to specify the audio folder. This is the folder that you have your audio tracks in, your MP3s or whatever type of audio that you want to play. Then the next variable is called audio extension, and that for my case is .mp3 because all of my audio files are MP3 files. Now the audio index variable is really in place so we can just put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 down the page just for display purposes. That way each one could be numbered. Is playing, this is a variable that's going to be keeping track of whether or not the audio object is playing or is paused or whatever. So if it's playing, this is going to be changed to true, and if it's not playing, it's going to remain false. And this variable, I don't even think I'm using that one. I think I put it there, but I never used it. So let's just take that away. Then the next variable is playing track, and that one is going to be the variable that keeps track of which one of these tracks are playing down here. And then the track box is obviously this div down here in the page with an ID of track box. Now the var tracks, that's a JSON object, and we have a very extensive JSON video training series that's free that you guys can go and watch right now, and you'll understand every little aspect of JSON object syntax and how to work with these objects. So I'll explain it very quickly though. The var tracks is a JSON object that contains 3 tracks in my case. Now you could put 50 or 100 in there if you want. And just make sure the last one does not have a comma. All of the ones before the last one, you see how they have a comma? So you can go ahead and stack as many as you want in here. And that's all the variables that we'll need initially. So the first track in the JSON object has an array. So its data is an array. The second one is also an array. And the third one is also an array. So you're working with arrays inside of a JSON object. And these identifiers really don't mean squat. You can name those whatever you want. I just named them track 1, 2, 3 so it made sense to you. But you can name that poo poo, pee pee, and caca. It doesn't matter. The application will still work the same. What is important are these arrays. So what I have here is the title, and that was the actual visible title that the user sees on the page. This is the MP3 file name. So you have the first element in this array is the title that's going to display on the page in the track bar, and then the next element in this array is the MP3 file name, the file name that's sitting in the folder. So in my folder I have fast_lane.mp3, I have breathe.mp3, and I have stranglehold.mp3 within my audio folder, the name of the files. This is just the title or the words that the user is going to see for that song. Okay, so now you should have a pretty good grasp on this whole tracks object. Alright, now directly under that JSON object, tracks, we're going to put a for loop that's going to loop over that object. So the logic reads for var track in tracks. So track is a variable we just made that's going to represent each individual track, track 1, track 2, track 3, as they pass through the loop. Track variable represents the individual tracks as they pass through this loop. This loop is going to run 3 times because I only have 3 tracks. If you had 50 tracks, your loop is going to run 50 times. And the first thing we do is set up some variables. One is called TB, and that's just short for track bar. The next one's called PB, and that's short for play button. The next variable is called TN, and that's short for track name. And you can see that the track bar is going to be a div element. And we're using the create element method to dynamically, or magically if you will, create a div. And then we're going to magically create a button, and we're also going to magically create another div. So you're going to have the track bar, and then inside of it we're going to add the button and then the track name div. So now here is where the CSS comes into play. We're going to apply CSS classes to these various new magical items that are going to be rendered to the page. So the track bar is going to get a class name of track bar. And what does that mean? That means all of these CSS properties are going to be applied to those divs. Now the next one is the play buttons. And the play buttons, we're going to give them a class name of play button, and that's right up here. So you have class play button, and they're going to get all of these properties applied to them. Then finally we have track name, and the track name div is going to have the track name class applied to it, and you can see that's right here. So all of these properties will be applied to the track name. You could set the font styling and all that stuff, and the margin space for that container, the color of the text, and specify the way it floats next to the play button. Okay, so that's applying all the CSS to those dynamically created elements. So we haven't added them to the document yet, but we've created them and they're ready to go, and we gave them class names. Now we can affect the track name div's inner HTML to put the track name in place. So we say audio index, that just puts a 1, 2, 3 wherever it is in the list. Then we put dot next to that, and then we put the track's title, the visible display title, which is this first element here, or this one or that one. So you go into the tracks object. For the individual track that's coming through the loop, you access its first element in the array. That gives you access to this. Now we're going to give each play button an ID, and the ID is going to be equal to the MP3 file name. So the first play button that's going to be rendered through this loop, it's going to have an ID of fast_lane. The second play button that comes through the loop is going to have an ID of breathe. And the third one is going to have an ID of stranglehold. And you can see we're going into the tracks object. For the individual track coming through the loop, we're accessing the second element in the array, which gives you this. Then, to the play button, we're going to add an event listener for the click event. Now when anybody clicks any of those play buttons, this switch track function is going to fire off. So you'll need that in place, so you just go down under the for loop and put function switch track, opening curly brace and closing curly brace. You can see in the switch track function we're referencing the event. That way we can identify which play button is being pressed. So I'm only putting event there because I want to be able to identify which play button is being pressed dynamically. Anywhere inside of this function I can refer to event.target, and that gives me access to the play button that's being pressed by the user dynamically. Alright, now right above the function switch track, we're going to add something, an event listener, to the audio object itself. So right here we're going to put that in place. Audio.addEventListener for the ended event. We're listening for the ended event. That means when any song ends, this function, the code within this function, these two lines are going to execute. So what we're saying in those two lines, anytime any of the audio files end, they come to their end, we're going to run this line which says the playing track, which keeps track of which track is playing. We're going to make that style.background equal to the play button, because while the song is playing it's going to have a pause image that the user sees. So when the song ends, of course you want to make it turn back to a play button, and that's all this line does. Then we say playing track is equal to nothing, because no tracks would be playing at that point because the song ended. So you take the var playing track and you make it empty. Now in the switch track function, I'm going to be assigning which is the playing track as the user clicks play buttons. And this one line takes care of that. We say playing track is equal to event.target.id. So the ID of the play button that's being pressed is going to be put into this playing track variable. Now I'm going to add some code right above that, and what it is condition statements, and here's all the code that I just pasted in. Now I didn't want to take the time to write all of that out line by line because you would all fall asleep and everybody would lose interest. So here's all the if else condition logic needed to power the application every time the user clicks switch track, because there's some considerations when a user clicks the play buttons. So if one song is playing, you have to switch to another to have another song play, and you also have to make sure you're turning the pause symbols back to play symbols, and the new song that is playing now, you have to change its play symbol to a pause symbol. So these if else evaluations are what take care of that, and I'm going to explain every line right now very quickly. Actually, before we discuss these evaluations, let's make sure it works. I'm going to render it in my favorite browser. Yep. Alright, so what's happening in this first grouping, you'll see it says if is playing. So that means if any tracks are currently playing, this code is going to execute. Else, this code is going to execute if no tracks are playing. If everything is paused or stopped, then this code is going to execute whenever somebody clicks one of those play buttons. If it is playing, this code is going to execute when they click any of those play buttons. So if something's playing and the user clicks any of the play buttons, we have to run a nested evaluation that says if the playing track is not equal to event.target.id, that means if they're not clicking a play button that's already playing. So if the person's clicking a play button that's not already playing, we're going to set the isPlaying variable to true. We're going to change the current playing track's image to a play button because it won't be playing anymore, and then the new track that's being assigned to play, its play button is going to be changed to a pause symbol. So this line changes the play symbol to a pause symbol for the track that the user wants to start playing, This line changes any pause symbol that was a pause symbol back to a play symbol. Then we just change the audio.source to the new file that the user is expressing that they want to hear by clicking its play button. So we say audio folder, which you know what that is. That's this variable up here for your audio folder. So you say audio folder, and you concatenate onto that string the event.targetID, and then you can concatenate onto the end of that the audio extension, which is .mp3. So basically it just goes into your audio folder, grabs the correct file name and puts the correct extension on the end of it. Then you just say audio.play to start it up. Now this else condition, this code in this else condition, is for when the user clicks a track that is already playing. If they click a track that's already playing, if they click its pause symbol, then we want to pause the audio. And then is playing variable gets turned to false because it's now paused. And then we change that button back to a play button so they can resume it again. Okay, so this is the last little bit of logic to explain here. Now this else condition comes into play if is playing is not true. See how we start the is playing false? So if is playing is equal to false, none of this code's going to run. Only this code's going to run. So this is the code that executes if nothing is playing and they go to start up a track. You just change the is playing variable to true. You target the play button. You make it style.background equal to the pause button because that track will now be playing. So you want to put the pause button as a graphical interface for that. And then we can run a similar evaluation that we did up here, which says if the playing track is not equal to the event.target.id, basically the track that that play button is connected to, if the playing track is not equal to that track, then we're going to change the audio source to the new track, but otherwise not. So if the playing track is equal to the play button that the track that the play button is connected to, then this code won't run. The audio source is only going to need to change if the user is clicking a button that's not already playing. And then finally you say audio.play, and that's if is playing is false. Now I hope that wasn't too complex to wrap your head around, and there's really no easier way that I could have explained it. And it could be written maybe in a more logical way. Maybe you can take a look at this application and say, hey, maybe I can just make this make more sense and Adam's a retard. Whatever. I don't care. It works for me. I like the way it works. It does the job. So if you want to critique my code, you can go right ahead. I don't even care. But it works really nice. You can use it if you want. Okay, now one last test. So it picks up where it left off if we happen to pause that song that's already playing. If we hit a new song, it just changes to that song. You can see our graphical interfaces for the play and pause symbols are working perfectly. Okay, so we've explained every single line of code in this application, so there really shouldn't be any places where you're confused in the code. And if you happen to get confused with the code, just ask a question under the video here and we'll all tackle your question together. We'll get you an answer. If you go to my website developphp.com and you click the menu, the main menu, and you go to JavaScript videos, you'll see that we already have down in the list an audio programming training series. Now in here we show how to make different kinds of playlists, because you might not want this kind of playlist that we just made in this tutorial. You might want a different kind of playlist. So you might benefit from seeing a different kind of playlist programming if you want. So you can go to audio playlist array tutorial. Now there was one more thing I'm supposed to discuss with you. Oh yeah, the buffering. When you put big files online, it could take time for those files to start up when somebody clicks play. So for video and audio, there's ways you can listen for buffering, and there's certain properties that you can use in your programming. And one property is called the waiting. So you would have the audio.waiting property, and if you happen to see that it's waiting, that means it's still looking it still doesn't have enough of the file to start play on it yet. So you can use that property of the audio object to program in buffering mechanisms, to where you can have like a little circular little arrow going around and round if it happens to be not ready to play yet. So I'm not going to program any of that for you, but I thought it would be nice for me to mention it to you, that there's different properties and methods associated with audio objects and video objects, to where you can listen for buffering. All you have to do is research in depth all of the properties and methods associated with the multimedia, and multimedia is audio and video, because a lot of the properties and methods for audio objects are also the properties and methods that the same properties and methods are used for the video object too. So they're kind of interchangeable, the audio and video object programming, to a certain degree. Okay, hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial, and remember, you can just pop this into any page and dynamically it will load all of these tracks right in. It will render all those tracks into your little track box, and this is all the HTML that you have to manage. The rest is dynamic script, and it doesn't matter if you have 2 tracks or 1,000 tracks. This little bit of code right here, this for loop, will render them all, because right here you're putting oh, I didn't even explain these lines. The track bar, we're appending child of play button to it, so we're putting the play button in the track bar in this line. Then we're putting the track name div into the track bar with this line. Then we're putting all of the track bars with their little play buttons and track names appended into the track box, which is the little div down here. Okay, that's it.